Welcome to the tutorial. This will be a voiceover, so please turn the volume up. Thank you. Before I start a sketch, I normally find a reference to use for the pose, since I struggle with finding correct leg placements that work and look correct. You can find real-life pictures if you want to, but my mind focuses on more cartoonish types of artwork better. However, I want to point out that there's a difference between using a reference and tracing. If I were to draw over the pose and use it, that's tracing. If I trace the picture and use shapes from it to build my sketch, as shown in Fennec's Mia contest entry, that's acceptable. That will be in the top link of my description. For the most part, I just use the reference for my sketching and use shapes to build the character. Keep in mind, up to this point all of my sketches were on paper, so it's not impossible to do on the paper. Just erase lines as you go to get a clear image as needed. Normally this is still done on paper, but since I have the opportunity to simply do it all digital now, I decided to do it on a separate layer than the sketch. The line art normally outlines and gives more detail to the sketch. This is also a good time when you're doing the line art over your drawing, whether it is everything or just a sketch, to adjust parts of the piece. This is shown a lot on my last commission video, so I will have that as a second link in the description. The fur is normally a mix of longer and shorter shapes that look like deformed triangles. I tend to look at pictures that look like the fur shapes I want, so I would suggest for the first bit of doing this to look at pictures of how they are drawn or videos, as there are various ways to do fur. With fur, I tend to only draw the longer and thicker ones compared to the rest of it, since I'm not really comfortable with doing small and short fur on creatures, so that's why you only really see chest hair, tail fur, etc. as the longer, more defined fur compared to the rest of the image. You can do whatever style and feeling you want, as this is more of a stylistic way to do fur, but that's just how I feel most comfortable doing. Again, I look at pictures of the kind of fur you want to have or videos so that you feel more comfortable and able to not exactly copy, but be able to sort of mimic the sort of feel they give. Coloring is where I put all of these colors down on the image. They are all in layers underneath that line art, and each color has their own layer for when the shading phase comes around. Additionally, I do change the background of the piece when I haven't made one yet, from the white to the dark checkered version, so I can spot any holes in the coloring in lighter colors such as white, gray, and light blue. My final piece for coloring is to keep in mind that you can change the color by simply adding another layer and turning it into a clipping mask, so you only color over that specific area of fur. If you're uncertain where the clipping mask is or how to use it, it will be shown in the tips and information part of the video, which is near the very end. Shading is one of the most asked questions regarding how I do it. Since I have never mastered the use black and white to do it parts of drawing, I learned to simply use a clipping mask on the part of the drawing I want to shade and use various shades of that specific color to shade and do lighter highlights of the original color. I do my best to leave a gap between the two so there's a better transition from dark to light. Once the colors are placed, the darkest shade being the shadows, and if you need really harsh shadows, you do even darker of that version, and having the lighter version of the original color as the highlights, I leave a gap between them, like I said, and I use the blur tool to blend the colors together. Keep in mind that the shading and highlights have to be on a separate layer than the original color, or else the background will get blended into the fur as well. With the settings of the blur, I keep the size to barely being bigger than the highlight and shade gap, and the opacity at various levels. My normal opacity in larger areas is 70% and in smaller areas is closer to 20%. Again, this will vary on how much of a blend you want to have, so keep in mind what you do. Additionally, I like to try to control how I blend, as I do not want to fully blend out a specific shade or highlight, and I also don't want to under accentuate or over accentuate a piece. Additionally, I also like having my highlights and my shadows on different layers of each other as well initially, and then put them on the same layer before I do the blending, but that's more of just what I want to do. With this little bit, I know it's not the drawing that I was showing, but I'm just trying to help. I don't know, I think I was just trying to point out that you should not put all the colors on the same layer because of shading reasons. If they're all on the same layer, there's a high chance of you blending other shades and colors in with the other colors, so then it's not as more direct or keen with that color. So shading is really needing layers. Layers are important. The eyes have a very unique process, as I first used the shading technique to create gradient in the color of the eye. From there, I add a new layer and have it on top of the rest of the layers. The layer then has to be changed from normal to add, as shown in the video. Once the layer is created, I choose the lightest color part of the eye and create a small dome over both the colored and the black part of the eye. Then, I use the blur tool and only blur the top half of the dome, not all of it, as there is a specific look I tend to want to have in my eyes. You can blur as much as you want, but for me, I keep it to just the top of the dome. Then I add the small white highlights of the eye and clean up the eye a bit as needed, whether needing to blur some things together a bit more, erasing parts. It just depends on what you want to have or see come out of your style. Backgrounds have been a common question as well. I'm not certain how to describe how I do them, so I did a variety and hope some of them are helpful. The first one you're seeing needs a base color to be placed, then have colors on a different layer. You use the liquify tool to move and form this kind of background. I don't use it a lot, but it's fun to do and helps create a warped background, as it is shown in my latest commission for Jay the Lynx. Although, it always depends on what you want to have. With me, I wanted a more, this is more of like a marble sort of feel. It's just different. It's more unique, but at the same time it's really distracting. So however you feel most comfortable doing, you do what you want to have. But this is just one example that I use. Also, this is a great way to show that the liquify tool can be used to help create different colors and create more unique designs within your piece. So if you want to have more of a pop or more modern looking piece of trying to be more like pop art or something, this would be a great idea to use for your fur or for different various reasons, as it is more of a unique and odd looking piece that also looks really extravagant and unique in its own form. I think this is also can be used to do water or markings. It's just it would be harder to duplicate if you do it as a marking. To create the gradients, I use various brushes to get different effects and feels, so it depends on your taste. I prefer using the airbrush to create smooth gradients, and the watercolor real brush to create a more cloudy or panic sort of feel, as shown right now. This is how the watercolor brush would do. I messed up here and I should have put a background color down first in a different layer before I did the red and cloudy feel after that. But I wasn't thinking at the time and I was panicking trying to get stuff done. So again, I apologize for messing up on that, but still this gives a really good idea as to what you can do with the blur tool and the real water brush. Now this next one I'm showing is the airbrush technique. Again, I should have put a base color down first before I gone to coloring it. So just whenever you do a background that's just going to be like one color or something like that, make sure you always have just a solid color put down first before you go in and add the lighter and darker versions if you're doing that sort of idea. Because again, I failed to do that, and although it doesn't look that bad, I still suggest having a background color and then adding whatever technique as ingredients or such as you want. Now, I'm going to point out that yes, you can see that I'm having access to all brushes, but that's because I'm willing to watch the videos, the ad videos that they have, so that I have them for access. This brush that you're seeing right here is the Sputtering 1 brush, and I simply use it to make dots bigger or smaller. And to do that, either you can try to make the range bigger, or you can just simply have them on different layers and just use the transform tool, which is at the top left, to make them bigger or smaller. I also like to have the layers to have different opacities to create a more ghostly effect. And I think another thing is also understanding the balance between having too many and too little of dots, as shown here. This is showing how to use the clipping mask. If you want more, look at the highlighted blue to figure it out. For my lines, I used the stabilizer to make them less wiggly. I used the ruler to create straight lines which can be angled as desired. There is a mirror option which I've used to make parts of a drawing the same on both sides, as shown in my latest commission video. And this spiral is great for creating circular designs and objects such as the inside parts of the lemon. That video will be the third link in the description. Thank you for sticking around, and while you're at it, check out Fennec tutorial that she did, as it explains a lot for this sketching portion. Link in the description.